have seen how we removed the Lenin monument. I was responsible. Yeah, so good. I was keeping that somebody else took from my house. I don't remember. Yeah.
It was, we had an interview
I see. Yeah. Yeah.
And then
good.
They said, well, we are sitting in a conference next door to me.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. So.
Member of European Parliament and Rapporteur for relations with Russia, also former Lithuanian Premier, and to come to speak up here. And we'll try to speak close to the mic.
Good. So, good afternoon to everybody. I can use that microphone if it's needed, but my voice maybe is quite loud. So really pleasure to be on the conference. It's honor. Really thanks a lot for invitation. And there are a lot of both sentiments coming from the past, and also some hopes and dreams looking into the future. And I'm coming to Danish Parliament, to Copenhagen. Always I have that mixture of feelings. First of all, really it was a pleasure to see and to listen Uffe Ellemann-Jensen, whom we consider as godfather of our independence and integration and whatever, and everything what we managed to achieve. That's for sure. So I'm really grateful to him personally, and of course to all the Danish politicians and Danish nation, for that support which we got. Of course, I can thank also all the Nordic countries for what you did at that time. But that was really when I'm remembering, the history, and when I'm now able to compare, what was done by Nordic countries then and what we are facing now. It's remarkable what you did and what we managed to achieve because of your strong political will. At that time, back when Uffe Ellemann-Jensen was creating our independence, I would also. I was executive secretary of our Savage movement, which was Popular Front movement for independence. And exactly on August 23rd, in 1991, immediately after the coup, I was responsible for removal of Lenin monument on the main square, in Vilnius. And now it appears that I was in some way watched upon, and even supervised maybe by that moment by Hanne Sørensen, which was present at the moment, and she, as I understood, she's able to keep till now, some stone from that Lenin monument, which unfortunately I lost, during the history. And once at some time I was visiting, really it was just, again, going back to those very, very emotional, moments. But when I was visiting Memorial Reagan Library in somewhere in California, and they were showing something like 10 minutes documentary about Reagan, everything what he managed to achieve, and those famous, pictures, Mr. Gorbachev turned down that wall. Around 1 minute in the middle of that documentary movie was exactly, the documentary, the video of how our Lenin from our square was saying farewell to all of us, to me, to Madame Hanne and to everybody, because it so happened that it was very difficult to remove it. And the crane, which we were using, they put the rope, around his neck, and then they were turning and turning, then the legs were broken, and since he was showing all the time, like he was standing during all the time in that Mauer main square, he was showing direction directly to KGB building, which was opposite, with his hand, And then when he was, removed, he was turning around in the air, and with that hand, waving to everybody goodbye. That was really a crucial moment how we said goodbye to Soviet, to Soviet time, and thanks to both to Van and thanks to Uffe, for bringing us really to that moment. But now more seriously, if you look into that history and to look into situation of today, we need to come to a very simple historical conclusion, which repeats and repeats itself again and again. Empires do not collapse during one day. That is what history teaches us. Now if you will look into after the Second World War, British Empire or French Empire started to dismantle. It was not one day, you are declaring that there's no more empire and that's done. French Republic was suffering very much, even till almost till the second half of 50s, when they had a program how to say farewell to Algeria and another former colonies. So now what we're facing in our region is really that this Soviet Empire or Russian Empire is still not gone totally. Formally it's not here, but all those post-imperial syndromes in society of Russia, in political leadership, which is trying to play, those emotions are still here. So that's pretty natural, unfortunately very tragic development in our region and in Russia itself. So really we were lucky to run away. With the help of Uffe, with the help of all others, we were really very happy, very lucky to run away from that post-imperial situation, while some other countries were not so lucky, like Ukrainians, like Belarusians, like others, unfortunately they are still in some kind of middle way, and including Russia itself. We were lucky. Why we were lucky? Again, I can repeat and repeat, because Nordic countries were crucially helpful at that time. That's very simple from my point of view. And for us, what stabilized our democracies, what stabilized rule of law, what stabilized our economies, and we started to create our prosperity. Of course, that was integration into EU and NATO. NATO brought security, EU brought a lot of other things, which I can name, and you know very well what does it mean. And that brings to me again very simple conclusion that EU has very strong soft power. Now, in assisting neighboring countries to change themselves, to become stable democracies with developed economies and so on and so on. Unfortunately, sometimes EU forgets about its power. So we need to use our power, to knock the doors in the EU institutions, in the capitals, trying to remind that really this is most important what EU can do with its within its powers in order really to bring stability into the neighborhood, and in such a way to spread democracy, to those regions which still are suffering, because of lack of that. So that is what my experience is saying. Very simple thing. I do not know any example in post 1990 Europe where any country which came out from totalitarian Soviet, socialist, or whatever we can call in any way that situation, which staying alone without integration towards EU, without using soft power of EU, would manage to become a stable democracy, a country which is able to develop itself. That is not not any case I can remember. So that is a responsibility of EU to understand what a role EU is able to play. And not always EU was good in playing that role. For us it was lucky that Russia was still Yeltsin Russia. EU was full of hopes, emotions and ambitions at that time in 1990, because Nordic countries were very powerfully pushing EU, and that what created our success. We are not different from when I'm asking myself, so why, for example, we were successful and, for example, Ukrainians struggled much more. It's not the difference in between of us and Ukrainians. Okay, we had different history. Our occupation in 1940s was not recognized by the international community. Ukraine had unfortunately different past, different history. But if you will look into the people, and especially now when you see what Ukrainians are able to achieve, how strong they are in fighting for European values, I don't know if we would be able to match that level. So it does not convince me that we were much better as the Baltics, and so on, and that's why we are included. And Ukrainians are something not that quality people. That's why they are still behind. Again and again, I'm repeating. I don't know if we have here any Italians, but sorry if I will say but I am, when I'm looking at Nordic Baltic region. And I'm always saying that we Lithuanians, we are Italians of the North. Because we are Catholics, we are much more emotional, we are swinging from one side to another, very easily, and we got several very deep, political crises during those 1990s. And what helped us, really, exactly. One thing is, Nordic support, Nordic, assistance and so on, but all the time, this soft power of you. Clear goal, what we can achieve. And at some time, when I was Prime Minister second time in 2008, 2012, when somebody was asking me, what is your agenda? I was saying, what is your government agenda? I was saying very simply, to become better than Estonians. That was my answer. Luckily, I don't know what had happened. Our GDP per capita in, I don't know, 0.1%. Now we are better than Estonians, and we are very proud of that. So it's again, some small jokes. But coming back to reality, what we're facing now, with the war, Putin's war against Ukraine and so on. Definitely, I can make a very simple conclusion, which I said at the very beginning. Russia is captured by its post-imperial syndromes, which are pretty natural. Unfortunately, they are tragic, but they are pretty natural. But those syndromes, at least, it brings for me some kind of optimism again, that those syndromes usually are not forever. I mean, with the change of generations, with 40 years travel in the desert like Moses was doing, those syndromes are evaporating, slowly but evaporating. Maybe Russia can stay for a longer period of time because of their history, but it will be gone. For time being, we need to make a very clear conclusion also on our side. Authoritarian Russia is the biggest threat to European security, to our security. That's what we need to understand. That was what we were trying to repeat, from 2000, 2001, when Putin came into power. Not everybody was believing us, in old Europe. Now evidence is here. Evidence is here. So that's what we need to make a very simple conclusion, that really this autocracy is a danger for us, for all of us, and then we need to see very clearly an answer. What to do with that danger? Of course, there are military means which we need to strengthen. I hope that the Danish people will vote in the referendum
in a good way.
Yeah, in that way, Yeah, we need to increase our defense, we need to increase our deterrence capabilities and things like that. But the long-term answer, how not to have this danger on the European continent for all our security is, of course, democracy in Russia. That's what we need to have in mind. And, and here again, of course, when the war started, for example, in Lithuania, I was hearing a lot of discussions. Well, democracy is not for Russia, you see. People are supporting the war, people are supporting Putin, and so on and so on. I am of different opinion. I see really some kind of historical tendencies. As I said, we were lucky with your support back in 1990s, to run away, to establish our democracy, even in Italian-like country like Lithuania. But now what we see, that democracy is slowly with all the problems, but it's spreading to eastern part of European continent. We can see, Ukraine with Maidan revolution in 2014. Then we can see, we can remember Armenia in 2018. Then, Moldova, what we can call, electoral Maidan, in 2021 and beginning in 2020 with Maya Sandu elected, Belarus appraisal in 2020. Okay, Lukashenko is still, here, but that was very clear message that loyalty of the people to authoritarian regimes is disappearing, because those authoritarian regimes are not able anymore to provide improvement of life, and then it's very easy it's very easy for that loyalty to disappear, and people are going into the streets. And for me, Russia is not an exemption from that tendency. Yes, we see those opinion polls and so on, but if you will look back into the history, you will see that in Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan, if we can use that terminology, during Second World War, people also were supporting, the war, they were supporting Hitler, they were supporting expansion of Japan into islands and so on and so on. Unfortunately, that is what is happening. That is what is happening even with such, really very well-educated nation like German nation. I am not an expert on those phenomena, how, what a brain drain you need to make, with the people, and what Goebbels and Hitler and what now, Putin and I don't know, Solovyov or some others, those names. But what are they using, to what we call zombify, to make zombies of the people? But that is happening. That is happening. But it does not mean that those nations are not able to recover and to become democratic. Again, if you will look now into Germany, if you will look now into Japanese society, they are very happy being Democrats. And they are not so much complaining about how they were with Western assistance, at that time, back after the Second World War, how they were made to become democracies. And the recipe is very simple. Unfortunately, not so easy, but very simple. First of all, because now we have also in Kremlin, or what we call, and in the parliament, more and more often, different parties are calling, that this is a new fascist regime. So that makes, this comparison with Nazi Germany, even more, easy to do. So first of all, such regimes need to lose their hold. That is, what was done, after Second World War, or during Second World War. Then, of course, other instruments like, Nuremberg Tribunal, like, I don't know, democracy with all the assistance from the West, and even Marshall Plan to stabilize democracy in Germany was part of that. So, so that is what I see as what we need to have in mind. And at least, in my view, what we see now, really Putin is losing his war in Ukraine. And that is beneficial not only for Ukraine and for all Europeans, that is beneficial also for the future of democratic Russia. That is what we need to have in mind. And that is our common goal. And that is why, again, I'm repeating and repeating that we need to see this war as our war. Not only the war of Ukrainians to defend their freedom, their independence, their sovereignty. It's our war for different future of the European continent. And And here I would tell just simply a few words what we are trying to do in Brussels, in the European Parliament and somewhere else. First of all, from the very beginning of the war, we started to create, and now we created informal network of parliamentarians with the title United for Ukraine. We now have more than, it's a global network, more than 250 members from different parliaments, from European Parliament, from national parliaments. We have around 12 perhaps from Danish Parliament and also Ukrainian Parliament members. And our goal is very simple. I'm always saying that if that is our war, we need to see what is the goal of our war. Of course, to defeat Russia, but how to achieve that? And I see two fronts. One is military front, in Ukraine, where we need to support, Ukrainian really very brave, heroic soldiers. Second front is Western capital, which is our responsibility. Really to assure that they are supporting Ukraine with clear vision, strong vision, and we have 6 goals in our network. 3 of them are what we can call, hot items, short-term agenda, like weapons delivery sanctions on Russia and humanitarian aid, and 3 are longer term, like candidate status and integration towards EU, Marshall Plan for reconstruction, and also international tribunal. So that is what we are trying to do. Now, priorities, of course, not only weapons but also candidate status and integration of Ukraine towards EU, in order really to create possibilities to use that soft power, most important instrument of EU, in order to create success of Ukraine. To create, stability of their democracy, growth of their economy, and so on and so on, and to see it not as only, the possibility to assist Ukrainians to have much better future, looking into the future, into times to come, but we need to understand that success of Ukraine is very also important as soft power, as an inspiration to Russian people to follow, the same way, to have, to inspire them to look for possibility to transform their country and to have possibility, what they call not just of democracy, but of normal life in Russia. Because what Putin is doing is, he waged a war not only against Ukraine, he waged a war against the future of Russia as a normal country. And that is what we need to speak out. And as it was said, I'm standing rapporteur on Russia also. And besides that, I created, being member of European Parliament, some kind of informal, again, network, with a nice title, Forum of the Friends of European Russia. And we started to make different, seminars, and at least one thing which I was happy that pandemic came. We learned how to use Zoom and WebEx, and we had plenty of those seminars because of that. Last year we calculated we had 19 seminars of that forum on different topics, development of Russia, future of Russia, and so on, with Russian opposition people, with Navalny team, with experts, experts from the West, members, that allowed us to have quite really nice and powerful community in the European Parliament, where we are elaborating different ideas. One of the outcomes was the European Parliament report on EU relations with Russia, which we managed to push through last September, before the war. But in that report, the first time perhaps, we said in a very clear way that the goal of EU policy towards Russia should be assistance for Russian transformation back to normal European type of development, European democracy. I am finishing, immediately, I know. You can negotiate with terrorism, but you cannot negotiate with seminar, leaders. So we push that agenda that our priority should be really, assistance to Russia, Russian transformation. Now, not dialogue with Putin, but assistance to transformation of Russia towards, democracy. And, we put very clearly what can help that transformation. So first of all, we said exactly at that time that our support and using our, soft power of EU to support Ukraine can be helpful, very much helpful to Russian transformation. Second, we said let's elaborate, some kind of strategic paper how EU relationship should look like towards democratic Russia. Somebody is saying, well, it's fantasy game, but that's very important to show Russian people that really, what are they losing? Because for time being, they have, this autocracy in Kremlin, which is not allowing them to have a normal, decent European life. And we are, elaborating now, exactly this, some kind of strategic papers and formal one, but I think that it can be really the beginning of much broader discussions, in different fora, in different, parliaments. Really, not only the war is very important, really, we need to win that war, but then, we need not to lose, momentum, and we need to see really, longer term perspective, how we can bring long-term stability and peace on the European continent, really to implement that dream, Europe go free and at peace. And that Europe go free and at peace demands, several things. It's freedom, of Ukraine. I have in mind, territory and things like that, sovereignty, but also it's freedom of Russian people. That is what is very important. So, and I have, I don't know why, but I am optimist. I still hope that during my life, I am now 66, I will see that dream to become reality.
Hi. Hello to everyone. It's a huge honor to stay here and to talk with you today, and a huge responsibility because of this peaceful, beautiful city today. I have to think what is going on in Mariupol and how the war is looking like today, not from TV channels, but near the front line. I want to say only one thing about future democratic Russia. Mr. Kubilius said that even post-war Germany became democratic, or imperialistic Japanese became democratic. But when it happened? When they lost the battlefield. And only this stage will be the first step how to become Russia democratic. Our men stay at home and they fighting. My husband is there too. And the Russians who want to be democratic and who want to live in democratic state have to back to Russia and fight for their democratic future. Sorry, I'm Ukrainian and it's very painful to talk about democratic Russia, but do not talk how to help Ukraine to survive today. I will speak not like politician or historical person, historian, but as Ukrainian. I think that I have only one superpower, that I'm Ukrainian. I'm regular Ukrainian, but I'm active as a part of civil society for 20 years. And it was a part of my life to help Ukraine to build democracy in my state. I became a part of all revolutions in my country. And now I see that everything is destroyed by Russia. Our dreams is destroyed now. Because someone decided that it's possible in 21st century to help Ukrainians to survive, but to kill tens of thousands of people after 24th of February. But the war started in 2014, and it was a huge mistake just to talk about democratic Russia on those days. Didn't help Ukraine to survive and to defend the territories, because territories, it's about people, it's not about land. So I did not matter what the name of president of modern Russia was, or who the Secretary General of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union was. At all times, Russians have tried and will try to subdue the will of the entire nation, and they will use violence and terror as effective tools to achieve their own goals. In order not to allow this approach to succeed, and not to provoke the further intervention against other independent states, your support of Ukraine is strategic investment in your own security and the truth that cannot be cancelled in the present-day wars. In recent months, I have been wondering how many parallels could be traced between the action of Putin's Russia and those of Soviet Union. I will not hold any intrigue. They can be found in every aggressive step against Ukrainian statehood and its people. The struggle for Ukrainian identity and independence did not end in 1991. Neither did Russia accept the reality that it was the end of Soviet Union. They are fighting for Soviet Union because they didn't accept that Soviet Union just ended as historical institution or historically as the state. To understand the scale of the grief and problems and the true strategic goal of the Russian Federation, we will have to go back almost 100 years. The Russian Federation will never be able to accept the fact that other nations have the right to self-determination and that they exist outside the jurisdiction of the Kremlin, whose buildings are still toured by the large red star. The artificial famine of 1932-1933 was a real act of genocide against the Ukrainian people, and it was organized by the totalitarian regime of Soviet Union. More than 4 million Ukrainians were killed by starvation of the fertile land of Ukraine. If you count the unborn children, the numbers get even more horrible. At the time, the world didn't react because it didn't know enough evidence. The totalitarian regime closed the borders and denied access to information about the real tragedies of the Ukrainian people, and it filled Western media with propaganda. From the 1930s to the 1980s, the genocide was silent and denied, including the Western intellectuals who took part in one of the largest campaigns of misinformation and big lie. Today we can access news in a real time online about the decision of the Russian authorities to expropriate millions of tons of Ukrainian grain, agricultural mechanisms, and products from the temporary occupied territories in the south of Ukraine. We can watch online how Ukrainian bread is brought to the territory of Russia, and farmers in Kherson region are forced to plant crops that they will not have the right to harvest or sell. It's about slavery, no? Moscow will take possession of everything in Ukrainian army does not succeed to reclaim this land by the autumn. Moreover, unfortunately, they will find evidence of the same horrors we saw in Bucha, Irpin, Mariupol, Borodyanka. Hundreds of thousands of graves will be found, with Ukrainian people tortured to death. Satellite images of victims with their hands tied have been found in the streets of the liberated cities in Kiev region and can be seen by everywhere. Trust me, military support of Ukraine, its humanitarian aid, just to stop these awful, horrible stories from the small and bigger cities in Ukraine. But even in our days, conditions of digital transparency, the Russian government refuses to tell the truth. We already know the names of the military personnel who were involved in war crimes in liberated cities. We have this list publicly already. We know where they are living in Russia. It's transparency online cyber war already, and we know everything about them. But President Vladimir Putin awarded the 64th Brigade that in March occupied Bucha in Kievska Oblast with the honorary title of the Guards. So they are heroes, according to his personal understanding. They did a great job. They tortured Ukrainian civilians and they killed Ukrainian children. This brigade was involved in war crimes in Bucha. Citizens of Ukraine are being tortured in the 21st century simply because Russians seek revenge over Ukrainians for the fact that they exist with their own distinct identity, culture, and inspiration to establish a democratic regime in the modern world. Today my country is in the flames of war. This unprovoked intervention by the Russian Federation is caused only by the fact that the Russian leaders and the absolute majority of the Russian people doesn't accept the collapse of Soviet Union. Violence against other nations, groundless deprivation of their right to identity, physical extermination of the will to political participation, murder and destruction of the political elite have not disappeared from the basic set of tools of the Russian state. Russia's imperial ambitions have no other platform than the ideology of violence, propaganda, and the physical and uncompromising destruction of everything that is able to resist. Democratic state and authoritarian and totalitarian regime will fight against each other because there can be no compromises between the right to life and identity on one hand and the right to kill for the sake of the subordination of all nations under the territories on the other. All we can say today is that liberal democracies do not enter a fight against each other, but they are forced to react to defend their rights and values. Ukraine and its people make up a frontier of this struggle today. Repression of dissidents and the killing of potentially active opponents of the regime was part of everyday, normal life under the Soviet Union. Today, Russia is using similar methods against civilians. The war in Ukraine is a full-scale fight for independence. It's our war for independence which is going on today in Ukraine, not in 1991. My grandmother was only 17 years old when she was accused and convicted for Ukrainian nationalism and imprisoned in Vorkuta, far away from Ukraine. My grandfather was 16 years old when he got a similar verdict in the name of Soviet Union. They were both rehabilitated after Ukraine declared its independence. After the security service of Ukraine declassified and opened access to all records from that cases against Ukrainians who wanted to be independent. At the time of other trials, my grandparents were basically children and did not commit any crimes if we assessed their actions through the prism of the law of democratic state. But they were unlikely to live and to born in totalitarian state under the Soviet rule. The United Nations was founded after the end of Second World War, was not in any way capable of reducing the degree of Russian aggression. But the fact that the word nation is part of the naming of this organization is very good for us, for the history, because to be a nation is not a crime. It's not about nationalism. It's about to be a part of your society with your identity, with your culture, with your language. My previous the previous speaker, Ukrainian, he was talking too much about languages. But it was a real history that Russians were fighting against us through the culture for many centuries. And unfortunately, being lingua in Ukraine is a result of that centuries fight. It's not like that. The Soviet Union has never been condemned for the atrocities committed by the totalitarian regime against Ukrainians. The world barely remember the huge price Ukraine paid for the victory over Nazi Germany. Some 61 states of the world took part in the Second World War and affected 80% of all human beings at that time. More than 110 million soldiers were enrolled in the armies of the countries that fought in that war. According to various sources, the total number of military and civilian dead on that days in between 50 million and 75 million. About 8 or 10 millions were Ukrainians. This is almost a quarter of the total population of Ukrainian people. We paid very high price for that winning victory, that winning war, Second World War on Ukrainian territory, because it was a huge battlefield even on those days, as today. More than 20 million people went through the repressive system of Soviet correction labor camp, you know, the word Gulag. And Ukrainians were most numerous among the detainees. There are only brief highlights to answer the question why Ukraine sought independence and why Russia failed to capture Kyiv within 48 hours in February 2020. And you know the answer, that it's about surviving. To fight for Ukraine now, for Ukrainians, it's about surviving. Every citizen in Ukraine is now confronted with images of the destroyed city of Mariupol and Donbass, and an incredible amount of Russian propaganda and hate speech against the Ukrainian state and its people. The ideology of violence is most effective against silent, unnamed and powerless people. Or every system of governance had its own resource and allocates a unique role to society. Democratic states are based on the philosophy that all citizens take part in the system of governance. A democratic politician is accountable to how society reacts and must consider also their interest in each minority or marginalized group. Authoritarian regime excludes society and citizens from the system of governance. They discourage you from being socially and politically active because it becomes risky for you, your business or your family. Elections became a fiction in Russia for many, many years ago. And it had, on those days, all of us had to be deeply concerned that Putin decided to be, during whole his life, to be a president. They also forced citizens to be a compliance in the crimes of the system. When there are hundreds of thousands of opponents in totalitarian regime, it is easy for the central authorities to maintain control because complicity in crimes forces people to protect their leader, regardless of what is true. In fact, a significant number of Russians now participate in the crime of the semi-totalitarian regime. They do it when they use the Z letter sign, when they access the sacred date of the May 9th is being assigned with new meanings, or accept the humanization and rehabilitation of Stalin. We are ready to end need a dialogue with Russia, but only after the victory in the war. Any reincarnation of the totalitarian regime of the past career risks that it will encourage on the neighboring countries. 30 years ago, on December 1st, 1991, an all-Ukrainian referendum on the independence of Ukraine was held. There was only one question: do you confirm the act of declaration of independence of Ukraine? 90% of the people answered, yes, I do. The voter turnout was 84%. There were no significant gaps in position between the regions. Kyiv voted for 92% for that. Donetsk Oblast voted for 83% for that. Luhansk Oblast voted for 83% for independence of Ukraine. Crimea voted near 60% for independence of Ukraine. After 1991, Ukraine had a student revolution on granite, the Orange Revolution in 2004, and the Revolution of Dignity in 2013-14. What I know for sure, Ukrainians fought for the establishment of a democratic regime of governance. It did not come to our country out of nowhere. Each of three events was a manifestation of a popular outcome against attempt to deprive citizens of participation in the political life of the country or against the violation of human rights. None of Ukrainian revolution happened because of economical issue. All of them were because of fighting for human rights and political rights to participate of the government of our country through these rights. In 30 years, no economical reason motivated people to go. Every time these events further alarmed Putin's authoritarian regime. In fact, the aggressive policy began in 2006. It began with the gas wars, which have always been a tool for influencing the policy of Ukraine, and now it demonstrates the dependence of the European Union that has become a hostage to alternative sources of food supply. Sorry, I'm very long in my speech, but it's my pain, the pain of my nation. Please, don't talk about Ukraine and Russia without Ukrainians. When the entire world's intelligence services predict the total loss to the world's second largest army, Ukraine was prepared to be the first largest army. Over the course of the past months, more than 400,000 of Ukrainian men returned to country from abroad. They had new homes, they had new jobs, they had a good position in EU countries and all over the world, but they decided to back to home and to fight for these homes. Charitable volunteer funds raised billions of hryvnias to help the army and civilians. The Ukrainian authorities have not run away. They take into account public opinion to guide their action, and the Ukrainian military have become advanced fighters with a high level of motivation. Russians are destroying everything in their way. That is why the Russian army can be stopped at this stage only in a military way. 95% of Ukrainians believe in victory and work hard to bring it closer. Next, we will have to rebuild the decimated infrastructure, the economy, and invest in the future, a democratic future. However, to prevent any further attempts of reincarnation, the Soviet Union, Russia must be held responsible for the act of aggression, for its war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide, what they are doing in Ukrainian land today, on these seconds. The evil left unpunished will only keep growing. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your interest in this very important and hard situation we have now. And we all feel pain, terrible pain in our hearts. I also have relatives in Ukraine, like many Russians, and I know what does it mean for Ukrainian. And I still think that we have to be survived from the darkness which wants to come into our soul to solve this tragical situation. We have to still stay in the light side and keep ourselves, because if we will not change the situation, then who will do this? And also I am very much thankful to Danish people because for years, maybe 10 years, I have been preparing and organizing seminars for people from Russia, for students who came here, and it's changed their life, really changed. And I'm very thankful. Many of you I know even here, and I hope you can be proud of you that you changed the life of many young and not only young adult people in Russia. And I hope we can do it again. Thank you.